What's up, you filthy flapjacks? My name is Wes, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. For today's episode, I chatted with Dan DeMarco of Admiral Fox. Back when the band was just a solo project, they released Winter in Limbo in early 2018. Now, they've revisited and re-recorded the entire album, which will be out this Friday. Dan and I talked about how the songs have grown, what his inspirations were for the re-recording, and a whole lot more. Without further ado, here's my interview with Dan of Admiral Fox on the Ear Coffee Podcast. How are you doing this fine Wednesday evening?
I'm great.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Glad we were able to make this happen. So just to get things going for the people at home, why don't you do a little bit of an introduction of yourself, your role in the band, and kind of just like a need-to-know basis for the people listening.
For sure. Sure. So yeah, I'm Dan. I'm the frontman, songwriter, and guitar player for Admiral Fox. Admiral Fox started as my solo project when I first moved to Minneapolis in 2018. And since then, I have been so lucky and met a bunch of talented people. And now I'm in an awesome band with some amazing musicians. And I write the songs and I sing them.
Yeah.
And I play guitar.
Rad. So I like getting a feel for how people first really connected with music because, as pretty much any musician knows, we have a deeper than usual connection with songs and music and the craft we've chosen. So I'm curious, how did you first really get started playing music and eventually writing songs? Just kind of walk me through those first pivotal moments of when you really kind of realized how important music was to you.
Sure. I was always kind of a musical kid. I would just kind of, if my father's to be believed, when I was an infant, I would burst into song regularly and just kind of sing gibberish. I don't have any memory of this, so it might not be true. But I remember the first time I really thought of like making music as something I want to do was when I learned about gorillas. I remember I was like staying up super late at night and I saw the music video for Dare by Gorillaz, which I don't know if you've seen that video, but it's like John Ryder's giant bald head in a lab. Yeah, and like Noodle is like dancing in front of it. And I had never heard the song before. I didn't know who Gorillaz were. And I just watched it and I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know that you could do anything remotely close to this with music at all. And I think it was like the next day I like looked up everything Gorillaz did and I got super into Blur, which is like Damon Albarn's other band. And that was kind of the beginning of me like listening to music super voraciously. And it just kind of gave me that like first taste of like, I want to do something like this. I want to make noises. I want to express my creativity in this way. Yeah. Kind of prior to that, I had been just mostly like a writer, and I would just write like short stories and like try to write like fantasy novels that were supposed to be like the first book in like a 7-book series.
Oh, yep. Like I know exactly how that feels. Yeah, I was in the same place when I was a kid.
Yeah, so that was kind of the only way I would really do creative stuff, and I would draw a lot too. But then I don't know, I watched that video and it just like realigned my creative drive, and I was like, I have to learn how to make songs. I started just like fooling around with GarageBand and making like weird synth noises. I didn't know what I was doing, but I don't know. That first music video for me just like really drove me to make music.
Blew the doors open, so to speak.
Yeah. It really did.
All right. So the main reason we're kind of here to talk is because next month, as of recording, Admiral Fox will be releasing, or rather I should say re-releasing, the debut record Winter in Limbo, which was originally put out on Bandcamp in February 2018. It's about a 2-year anniversary. Is it exact, if I may ask?
If I had made it exact, I think I would have had to release it on like a Thursday or some random day, and I wanted to do it on the Friday, so it's not quite exact. It's like a day after or something.
But close enough. The spirit is there. You told me that initially these songs were kind of written and recorded as you were moving to Minneapolis around that time. And so I'm curious, what initially led you to Minneapolis? Where were you coming from? I think you also mentioned that it was a pretty long journey. Like it took a while for you to get everything over here. So I'm curious, just what was kind of going on? What led you to Minneapolis around that time? And you
Um,
stayed here since, obviously.
sure. So I had gone to school in Iowa City, and then I stayed in Iowa City for 3 years afterwards. So I had spent 7 years in Iowa, and I love Iowa City. I'm actually in Iowa City right now, and it's a great town. But I was kind of feeling like it was time for me to go somewhere else. I didn't really know where I would go though. But a lot of my friends that I had made in Iowa City had moved on to Minneapolis, and I had heard that, it's a great city, very artsy, which really appealed to me. Um, a lot to explore, a lot of really cool parks and stuff like that. And it always kind of stood out to me as like, oh, that could be a place I could possibly move. So I eventually sort of moved out of Iowa City and I moved back in with my parents for a little while. And during that time, I was traveling to a few different places to kind of figure out where I was going to move. Um, and I was also like applying to grad school during that time. And so I think I was kind of telling my family, like, oh, I'm just going to be traveling while I apply to grad school. And then when I get accepted, I'll just move to wherever I got accepted. But Minneapolis was my first stop on that trip. And I immediately just like fell in love with the town and I reconnected with a lot of old friends and that was so nice. And they really showed me around and I just loved it instantly. Um, and then kind of as I went on the rest of that road trip, that's when I was writing the Winter in Limbo songs and just recording them all on my MacBook. Um, and yeah, just for whatever reason, Minneapolis, despite the fact that I ended up traveling to a few other towns, I was just like, I really need to move to Minneapolis. And I ended up moving into Minneapolis in December of 2017, which was an interesting choice on my part. Uh, and before I had even finished my grad school applications, because I just loved it so much, I ended up not getting accepted into any of the programs I applied to. And I didn't even care because that would have meant I had to move away, which I did not want to do. Um, and it was just nice to kind of like, I moved to Minneapolis and then I had these 10 songs as kind of like a travelogue. Because every time I think about the songs, I kind of remember the place I was when I wrote those songs
Hmm.
while I was kind of road tripping across the states.
Yeah. Was any of it kind of conceived, or did you have the idea of working on music and kind of writing and recording your own stuff before you started kind of your travel log, your journey around, or was this something that just kind of the idea arose as you were in motion, so to speak?
Well, I'm always just writing music. The way I recorded back then, where I just record everything on my MacBook on GarageBand, up until that point, that had just been the way I recorded every song I ever wrote and released, because I just had no gear at all. Um, and I'd been recording music that way, for a long time. And so that was just kind of me just doing what I always do. The only difference was that I was in a lot of different places. I wasn't just in like my apartment back in Iowa. I was in all these different towns. And, one pro of having such a limited setup was that I was able to set it up anywhere I wanted. I just had to open my MacBook and aim my guitar at it. And there was very little, gear to have to unpack or anything like that. So it was, yeah, just kind of a natural extension of what I'd already been doing.
Yeah. Um, so I'm curious, what kind of was your mindset when you were in this process of moving around and eventually ending in Minneapolis as you were writing these songs? And I'm curious, did you have any idea that you were working towards an album, or were these just kind of 10 recently written and recorded songs you felt pretty good about that you wanted to just put out into the world and just kind of grouped them together? Or
Mm-hmm.
what were you thinking about as far as recording and releasing and writing all this stuff around that time?
Well, again, just kind of I feel like Winter in Limbo is kind of my first like grown-up album because it was really born out of a lot of just pre-existing ways I would write, where I would just like, I'm gonna write these songs. When I have a certain number of songs, that will be the album, and then the album is done, and I'll start working on the next album, and I'll put it out, and I won't really promote it. I won't master it. I won't do any of that stuff. I'll just put it on my Bandcamp and just get started on the next one. And that wasn't even, Admiral Fox didn't exist when I was writing those songs. It was just, Dan DeMarco. I was actually going under a different name, Inky the Cat, at the time, which no one ever needs to look that name up ever. But like, yeah, like, Admiral Fox didn't exist. It was just me just driving around and essentially just doing what I had always done. In regards to kind of my mindset while I was road tripping, I definitely had kind of this almost like nihilistic kind of attitude at the time because I was escaping in a lot of ways. Like Iowa City had kind of become a depressing place for me to be at the time, and I left and moved away without really a clear idea of what I was going to do next. And so, in a lot of ways, this road trip was kind of like, I just want to be by myself right now. I don't want to even be around like my family. I just kind of want to be in new places. I've been in the same place for 7 years. I want to do different things. I don't really know exactly what they're going to be, but I just want to be somewhere different. And it didn't really even matter where I went as long as it was kind of a new place.
Yeah. It's kind of that feeling of
And I think a lot of
escaping.
those,
Yeah.
yeah, it was very escape. It was just a big escape, basically. And I think a lot of those ideas kind of translate through the music, where just a lot of like melancholy and just kind of singer-songwriting kind of tunes, which again was the style I was the most familiar with and had been writing pretty much up to that point. And then I don't know, it was just one of those things where the universe just gives you kind of a moment, right? Like I moved into this super tiny studio apartment in Minneapolis where it was literally just everything was in one room. Like the oven was next to my bed and there was like a tiny closet. I didn't even have a toilet. I had to like share the toilet with the whole rest of the floor.
Oh,
It was
like
like
it's
dorm
college.
style.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like dorm style. And I was like, fuck, I'm 27. I'm like living in this dorm style apartment. Um, but it was I didn't even care because it was like this new place. I was living on my own for the first time in a long time, and I just kind of felt very empowered. And I had just this album that I had completed while I was on the road, and it was just kind of like, you know what? I have this new album. I'm in a new place. I'm going to start a new music project under a new name, and I, yeah, and I did with
Yeah.
Winter in Limbo. Which was great.
That is true. That
Yeah.
is a fact.
And that is
Um,
what I did.
yeah. So, following that initial release of Winter in Limbo, how did you end up meeting your now bandmates that form like the full band lineup for Admiral Fox
Yeah.
that was on St. Cloud and Nowhere is Safe, the two
Mhm.
subsequent releases you put out in between the sandwich of Winter and Limbos, the two
Sure,
versions.
sure. So we started kind of playing while I was recording St. Cloud. But the way that I met them was my girlfriend knew Walt Smits, who is the guy behind our music videos. And he makes amazing music videos. He's a fantastic filmmaker. And she had already known him. And I kind of, when I was first dating her, and I was like, hey, I'm a musician. Um, and I want to make like a music video. She gave me Walt's phone number. And I got in contact with Walt, and he made a music video for the song Winter in Limbo. And then he let me know that he was living with three other musicians who happened to have like a practice space. Uh, and I came over, I visited them. I remember, I think I visited them during like a viewing, or not a viewing, like a screening of a like web miniseries that Walt had created. And Lucas Rallo, who's our bass player and synth player, was like starring as like the lead in this web series. It was really cool, kind of off the wall, surreal web series. And that's when I met Lucas. And he told me that he was a student in like audio, and he was like, I can if you want to like do a studio recording of one of your songs, I'd be happy to be like the engineer for that. And I was like, sure. And then he engineered Space Cadet, which is the first song on St. Cloud. And we just started practicing together a lot. And his roommates, Matt and Ben, kind of joined in. And we were just like, holy shit, we're a band.
Yeah, it kind of worked out perfectly
So,
like that.
yeah, it did. I mean, I really lucked out. It was really just another moment of like the universe is like, hey, moving to Minneapolis was the right choice. Here's
Yeah.
a band. Here's three guys that have been playing together for a super long time. They're super in sync. They're great at playing their instruments. and it just came together so perfectly.
Yeah, everything's just kind of coming together again. That's rad. So you mentioned in your email from a little bit ago that songs like Marcy make it better or makes it better, and some of the other ones, I think the first track on the record,
Mhm.
I'm like on the
Twilight
name.
Zone.
Yeah, Twilight Zone, have been incorporated in the band's like live set, and you've been playing them throughout the last couple of years. How did those songs change once you brought them to the band and kind of really had way more options, way more tools to make these songs come to life than you had when you were just you and your MacBook?
For
Um,
sure. I mean, the main difference is that now people that actually know how to play the instruments are playing on them, whereas before it's just me doing everything. And like guitar, I can play. Singing, I enjoy singing. With like bass, I know how to play a bass. I can make the bass make noises and play notes. But like Lucas is like a bassist, and like he actually changed some of the bass lines, and he added to the Marcy bass line in this like beautiful way. Whereas like my instinct is to just kind of play like the bass note of each chord because that's it for me. Yeah, whereas Lucas just is able to actually approach it the way a bass player does, and actually come up with some interesting bass lines. And he actually working with him has affected the way I approach bass lines when I'm just writing, music at home. This way, instead of just playing like one note for each chord, I can actually like, oh, maybe I should, use a scale and use, not just the bass note of every chord. Ben is, such a fantastic drummer, and it's just a huge difference to hear like actual live drums on a song as opposed to just, a garage band preset electric drum kit. It's not even a contest. And Ben is also just a fantastic, amazing drummer, and he is just kind of the energy source behind a lot of our like live shows. He is just like to hear him just pounding on those drums, especially on Twilight Zone, and especially in a lot of Nowhere is Safe songs. He just breathes this energy into all the music. When I was by myself, as a solo recorder, and a big part of that is that I have no idea how to play drums. I can't play drums to save my life, so I would just use like electronic drum kits. And yeah, just the energy that a live drummer brings to a song is so much different. Matt, he is just an amazing guitarist. Like when I can't solo or like shred or really anything. I'm great at rhythm guitar. You give me a chord progression, I'll play the shit out of it. But like I'll just be like, yeah, and then Matt, if you want to solo over it, and he's super humble about it. He'll be like, oh yeah, just like and just like go
just
off on this
shred.
crazy ass
Yeah.
solo. And like I'll just like stare at him wide eyed, like you just did that without even thinking about it. Like and like it's crazy to see him he's so good at feeding off the crowd too. So many of our live songs, like Marcy, we extend beyond the studio version, just extend that solo time just to give Matt this space to really just get into the chords and really get into the solos. We do the same thing with like Baby Owl and just a lot of like the more songs where there's like a space to kind of jam. Matt just is really good at just putting a great solo over top of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I didn't want to cut you off, obviously. Um,
I can't praise my band enough. I mean, they just like
yeah,
really take my songs and just like take them into the stratosphere.
that's the best part of being in bands. Each member just kind of
Absolutely.
elevates everything in their own special way to make something that hopefully rocks in the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Lucas is also a great keyboard player, and he's so nice about me just handing him these incomprehensible synth parts and just taking the time to learn them all,
yeah.
and just does a great job with them.
hmm that's the unspoken and humble job of many a synth player. It's like, how do I turn this into something that will sound in the end? Um, so I'm curious. Did you ever think that you would revisit all of these songs, not just the ones the band had been playing live for a little while,
Mhm.
to re-record, kind of create a new version of this album and all of these songs? Did you ever think you would do that before kind of the incentive of just being stuck at home in quarantine during those first couple months and you just didn't really
I
have
had
anything
always
else to
thought
do?
about it.
Okay.
I had always thought about doing it just because St. Cloud was the first album I had recorded in a studio
hmm
with Meteor Based Studios, which was a great experience. And the jump just in quality between Winter in Limbo and St. Cloud made me suddenly very like self-conscious of how raw and just very rough Winter in Limbo sounded. Um, and so I kind of around that time was like, should I re-record Winter in Limbo? Like Car Seat Headrest had just re-recorded Twin Fantasy,
Yeah.
which I don't know if you're a Car Seat Headrest fan.
Oh, yeah, I am. That's
Yeah,
light and
hell
day.
yeah, and yeah, and so like he had just done that, and I was like, fuck, like people. Because the other thing was like, would people even care? Like, does it matter? And then
Yeah.
the new Twin Fantasy came out, and I was like, holy shit! And listening to that also told me like, okay, he's not just literally re-recording; he's adding new things.
Hmm.
He's changing the structures of stuff, and that really inspired me to do the same thing
Yeah.
when I revisited Winter in Limbo. Because to be honest, I mean, like there were certain songs off of Winter in Limbo I had kind of fallen out of love with.
Hmm.
Um, and I was kind of like, if I do re-record Winter in Limbo, should I even do those songs? We never play them. Nobody ever really talks about them. I skip them. Is there a point? But then with like the new Twin Fantasy coming out, I was kind of like, you know what? I'm going to redo them in a way where I find them interesting again. I'm going to
Yeah.
kind of fall back in love with the songs. And I was able to do that. And I really do think that's going to make this revamp of Winter in Limbo a lot more interesting.
Yeah. That kind of answered a question I wanted to ask you about that. Like, were there some songs that you did kind of want to stay more faithful to, whether those were the songs that had evolved with the band as you guys played them, or yeah, was it just really like the songs that you were you kept in your life that you wanted to stay a little bit more faithful with, and then really just reinvent the other songs that, like you said, you'd fallen out of love with? Is that kind of how you grouped them mentally before tackling the project?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of have that relationship with most of my albums. I
Hmm.
sort of have like the favorites of mine over time. And then kind of the ones that they fall out of favor with me for whatever reason. And I think
Hmm.
my ultimate goal for any album I make is to have an album that's all songs that I still love,
Yeah.
even years down the line. Enter in Limbo, yeah, there were certain songs where I was just kind of like, I need to drastically change this because I
Hmm.
really don't enjoy it the way that it is right now. And we never play it live
Hmm.
ever. We have, there are still songs on Winter in Limbo we haven't done live even once. And I think part of that was just because like we were just so much more interested in songs like Twilight Zone or Marcy Make It Better, or You're Just Like a Sparrow, that are just more energy packed and
Hmm.
just like a lot more fun to play.
Exactly.
And really just the slower songs on Winter in Limbo were the songs that I guess I kind of stayed away from and felt like restructuring. So like yeah, like
Hmm.
songs like Twilight Zone and Marcy, those are pretty unchanged because they're sacred at this point. Um, the really only difference is that they're faster.
Yeah. Okay.
Another big discovery for me when I re-listened to Winter in Limbo is it's very slow.
Hmm.
For whatever reason, like the tempos on all of the songs is just like sluggish.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the main thing I wanted to do because when you play with a band, you kind of are playing fast and you're playing loud and it's more exciting. And then I would like play Twilight Zone and it would be so much fun. And then I'd listen to like the old Twilight Zone and it's like slow as hell. And I was just like, this
Yeah.
isn't really engaging me. So for most of the songs, they're faster.
Hmm.
Um, the songs are also generally shorter than they were in their original
I noticed
forms. Like
that.
Bane,
Yeah.
yeah, Bane versus Batman used to be like 5 minutes long. Now it's like 2.5 minutes long.
Hmm.
That's probably the song that I changed the most
Yeah.
um, because it originally had this really long intro that at the time I really enjoyed putting together, and it was kind of like just another example of like me being at home making all these loops and just being all by myself and not
Hmm.
really having anyone to bounce it off of. Um, and then revisiting it, I was just like, I don't need this intro. I'm just going to cut it out. I'm going to start just when the verse starts, and we'll save the intro for kind of like the outro loud section.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot better for it.
Hmm.
Um, and there were a couple songs where I just restructured them to be like a little quicker, a little shorter,
Yeah.
and just a little more ear candy.
Yeah. Kind of, you had the benefit of hindsight for these, where
Yeah,
you
exactly.
had 2 years to really consider these songs and absorb how they were, I guess, in a more neutral position. Because when you're in the process of making these songs, I'm just kind of in general, I think for anybody, it's a lot easier to get kind of swept up in it, and you don't always have
Absolutely.
like the best perspective. And that isn't like knock the original like, versions of any songs, or just that's how just musicians work sometimes. But
For sure. I mean,
hindsight, definitely, yeah.
my like going off that, my point of view when I'm writing a song, like the first time, is just like anything goes. Any
Hmm.
idea that I'm thinking about, or that excuse me, or that a band member brings up, it's like let's just do it.
Let's give it a shot.
If it sounds like crap, then we'll never do it again. We'll never speak of it.
Yeah.
But if it's great, you know, and it's this new thing we haven't done yet, like let's explore it. Let's figure it out. And a lot of great ideas come out of that
Hmm.
sort of zone.
Yeah. This is kind of random, but
The
that
key is
reminds me.
knowing what
Oh,
to. I was just going to say the key is knowing like what to show other people and whatnot.
yes, I agree. This is kind of random, but that reminds me of, I think, a quote from Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, where he talks about when the band got together to practice. I think like kind of after their initial kind of critical and creative peak, um, they would have like bad idea, like a section where every member of the band has to like have some idea, no matter how bad it is. And like you're kind of saying, most of the time never sees the light of day. But then in
Yeah,
his words, sometimes it comes out with like dude looks like a lady, which that's a bit hasn't aged well, so maybe not the best example. But I think like the core essence of
yeah,
what he's getting at is a better thing to focus on than what he deems to be a good result. Um,
yeah. I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah, like sometimes just an off the wall zany one off idea turns into just like a really good song and a
Hmm.
song that you're known for.
Yeah. Uh, how did your what did you discover about these songs as you were, I guess, revisiting them in more in depth than you had since really the recording, with the exception of obviously like Marcy and Twilight Zone, the songs that had been pretty constant. Um, was most of the discovery kind of rooted in the things you wanted to change that you already kind of touched on, and how you wanted to grow these songs into versions that you would actually feel comfortable just releasing more publicly, I suppose? Or like how did your perspective on them shift overall, kind of as even like just lyrically speaking? Because I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of that, if not all of it, stayed the lyrics stayed the same, or did you modify the lyrics as you modified other parts of the songs?
I changed a couple lyrics on Marcy,
Hmm.
and I actually felt very like weird doing it just because like Marcy again is just like a sacred song to me,
Hmm.
and I kind of had to step back and be like, nothing is sacred, no gods, no masters. Just change the song, fine. Just because Marcy is such a well-known song for us. Um, but I changed those lyrics because they used to kind of have this weird anti-protester sentiment that was not
Yeah,
intentional.
like the
But
line
I
about
kind
like the guy on
of
the
like,
side of the road or whatever with a sign.
yeah, and I wrote that. The thing is, I wrote Marcy even before I went on this road trip. I wrote Marcy a long, long time ago. It's an old song for me.
Hmm.
And I just kind of wrote that line, not really thinking about it. I wasn't really thinking of any kind of political movement. But in 2020 and 2021, I did not want to be singing a song about how, like, fuck protesters, I'm going to stay inside and not do anything. Because we are a pretty, like, politically active band.
Hmm.
And I don't need people thinking that I'm some sort of, like, anti activist
Yeah.
songwriter. So it kind of like, even if nobody took it that way, it was just really important to me to change that line. So I changed. I just I changed it to just more lovey. Like Marcy knows how to make it better. Makes me feel good. Doesn't have to do anything about protesting or anything like
Hmm.
that. That's kind of the main. I think that might be the only time I changed the lyrics
Hmm.
for any of these old songs. Um, as to what I like discovered about my old music and just kind of going back is that like I just kind of had to rediscover what I like loved about each song and just kind of the heart of each song.
Hmm.
Songs like Bane versus Batman, I just kind of started thinking they were trash. Honestly, I didn't really like the song at all. And then re-recording it with this new structure, just kind of a slightly new sound, I suddenly fell back in love with Bane versus Batman, and now it's like one of my favorite songs on the new album. Um, and I just had a couple moments like that where I had to sort of like
Hmm.
remind myself why I wrote the song in the first place and figure out how to emphasize what I loved about it.
Hmm. Yeah. how did you decide to add the two, I guess, fully new songs? The Because the new version of Winter in Limbo has the 12 tracks, prior version has the only 10. Are those two
Yeah.
songs that you wrote during the process of re-recording, or those two other songs you kind of excavated from that period in 2017 when you were writing most of these songs initially?
Those are two songs that have been super excavated. They both actually predate the Winter in Limbo writing
Okay.
period, but they both just kind of represent my mood while Winter in Limbo is coming together. And they were both
Hmm.
songs that I wanted there to be listenable versions of.
Hmm.
Foolish to Assume is a song, the final track is a song that I had played at open mics a lot when I first came here. And it was a song that was pretty, it was really nice to play, and it just has this really sweet mood to it. But I had never released it because it was
Hmm.
so old. Um, and so it just felt like it needed a spot somewhere. And I wanted to also just kind of give people more of a reason to listen to the new Winter in Limbo. So I thought, why not re-record Foolish to Assume and include it? And then I needed another song because I have just kind of this weird hatred of albums that only have 11 tracks. I don't know why. I don't like 11 tracks. There are many great albums that have 11 songs on them, but for some reason, I does not sit right with me to only have 11 songs on it. It's got to be 10 or 12 or more, but never 11. Um, so I needed another song. And I found First Responder, which is a pretty like, the lyrics on First Responder are pretty, very personal, and they deal with like depression and you know, just kind of harmful thoughts. But I don't know, they came from kind of the same era that Foolish to Assume did. And I feel like those two songs are just, in my mind, linked in a certain way.
Yeah.
And it just felt right to re record it. Because that's another example of a song that was like very slow. It had this very kind of like trudging mood to it. So I was like, I'm gonna make it really fast. I'm gonna make it really distorted. I'm gonna like that. I moved the key up so
Yeah.
that I'm kind of singing at a higher, more strained register.
Hmm.
And then I was just saying that was also kind of a major change for a lot of the songs is they're in higher keys. Because when I was recording by myself, I didn't really know how I sounded live because I would just sit in my room and just kind of sing to myself. I didn't even know how to monitor my own voice. So I just kind of would sit and hope I was singing the right notes.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, when you're very relaxed and you're just by yourself, it's easier to kind of reach very low notes. But when you're kind of performing live, it's a lot easier to hit kind of a higher register and strain. And I also kind of like to put a little rasp on my vocal delivery and just kind of make it sound a little rougher. So when I revisited these songs, I just would move them up a few keys, a few
Hmm.
semitones,
Yeah.
just to kind of push that, make my voice a little raspier, pushing it, making it sound a little more live.
Yeah. Really just kind of push the energy for all the songs to a new a new high, a new kind of point where you wanted them to be. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um okay. Talk a little bit about how the recording process was, because from what I understand it was entirely self-performed and recorded with the exception of some backing vocals that Lucas did on I think just two tracks.
Yeah,
Um
so Lucas does backing vocals on Bane versus Batman and on Foolish to Assume.
mhm.
But other than that, yeah, everything is me. I kind of had this idea where it just made sense to me to, when re-recording, to kind of keep the same environment
Mhm.
as when I was originally recording Winter in Limbo, which meant like just me, do it on GarageBand, mix it myself. The difference is I'm a better performer now. I have better recording gear. I'm no longer just using my MacBook microphone. I have like better headphones now because like Winter in Limbo was mixed on like CVS earbuds. Everything was
Yeah.
just so like low, just like low quality. So now that I kind of have this, better gear, I'm going to do the same thing I did with Winter in Limbo, but with better gear. And I
Yeah.
think that because I do think that the like lo-fi-ness of Winter in Limbo is really important to the
Okay.
sound. I wanted to keep that element, that home recorded and kind of like hand stitched
Yeah.
element of it. I just wanted it to sound a little bit better,
Yeah,
basically.
sound better.
So
Kind of, you had your higher level of performance ability just from years of, like you said, just doing live shows, just learning more about recording and performing and everything, and just really up in the ante, kind of in a way, while still retaining like the heart and soul of the album.
absolutely, because I felt like if I did it in a studio, it would have just been too like sparkly, and I still wanted it to be a little lo-fi,
Yeah.
but just like you said, just kind of push it a little more, make it a little more palatable.
Yeah. Um, so how are you overall feeling about putting this new version of the songs out? Because I'm guessing this will be a lot of people's first experiences with these songs outside of people that have caught you live or have just known you for a long enough time that they would have maybe checked out the old Winter in Limbo. Yeah, just kind of tell me how you're feeling about this whole just re-releasing the record.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really excited. I also feel nervous, which is how I feel every time I ever release anything.
Hmm.
But I feel, in regards to like this will be people's first exposure to these songs outside of live performances. That was the intention,
Yeah.
right? Because like I would so much rather someone's first listen of Marcy Make It Better to be the single we just dropped
Hmm.
than the 2018 version of Marcy. Same with any song off of
Hmm.
Winter in Limbo. I still love that first album because of like what it meant to me personally making it, and I know that a lot of my friends and a lot of our fans like the album too, and that does mean a lot to me. But I just feel like in my head it sounded like the album we're dropping, right now. And so I just think that yeah, I'm excited to share these songs the way I originally intended for them to sound.
Yeah, that's kind of the hope and dream with that.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
excited.
yeah, has the band started like as kind of,
Yeah.
I guess bands have gotten more comfortable with like COVID, and people have been able to take more precautions. Has the band gotten back together in any way, shape, or form to start working on? I think you mentioned like just working on the follow up to Nowhere is Safe, whatever that may look like. Has your focus still pretty much been primarily on finishing up the reworked Winter in Limbo?
My focus has been pretty much just on Winter in Limbo. I've been staying pretty socially distant
Mm-hmm.
from everyone, and unfortunately, that means like the band has not really gotten together in kind of a while at this point.
Yeah.
Our next step is definitely going to be to kind of once things seem safer to be rehearsing again, going over the new material because there is a lot of new material, Wes. There's
Yeah.
so much new. There's so many new songs, and I'm so ready to release them too. It's kind of been I've just been working on these two projects simultaneously,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm so excited to show the new songs to the band. But I honestly have just been really isolated,
Mm-hmm.
um, and yeah, I've been talking a lot with Lucas, and I talked to Matt and Ben too. But it has been a lot of just very socially distant.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been in like the same room in a really long time.
Yeah. Do you think
So
that
that's going to happen after Winter in Limbo
yeah.
comes out.
Do you think that isolation has informed the new songs, at least the ones that maybe have been written since COVID
Absolutely.
started? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't help but write songs that are affected by just my environment and how I feel at
That
the
makes
time.
sense.
That's my style
Yeah.
is to just be like, this is how I'm feeling. I'm going to just say it and it's going to be real. Um, so yeah, the new music, it's very much like Nora's Safe. It's
Hmm.
pretty political. It's talking about just current events and my
Hmm.
anxious feelings about them. Um, and with the events that just happened last week, I get the feeling I'm gonna have even more new material pretty soon.
Yeah.
Um, but it is in regards to just songwriting, it is a good feeling to have to know that I have like an album's worth of material just in the hopper.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's nice to have a lot of stuff. Kind of, I get weirdly like hoardy about it. I just want to have like a lot of songs just to have them in case I need them to like back up
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah. No, I've interviewed bands or Joe or I have interviewed bands where they've been like, yeah, we have like 5 albums worth of material just written and maybe even demoed, but just haven't released it yet. And then they just have like this almost infinite spring from which they can draw new song ideas as they're working
Yeah,
towards a next release. So that's something that's a little frustrating for me because I'm like, "Ah, I want to hear them. Come on.
just
But
release it.
as a musician, that does, and I understand that point of view, and I think that does work very well as far as just kind of having a lot of options going forward
Mhm.
as you learn more about the songs as the band kind of discovers how they want them to sound and how they come out. Yeah.
Exactly. And you also like a lot of times like you're writing songs and you have like a huge amount of songs, but they don't all complement each other
Hmm.
with the way they sound. And I think that with Admiral Fox, we've always kind of had these two opposing forces of like we want to sound punk and grungy and distorted and like in your face, but we also have this very pretty kind of synth driven side as well. And I think that I don't want to speak for the whole band, but at least for me, my kind of songwriting struggle is like, how can I mix the gritty with the pretty? And like, just how can I get kind of like the grungy garage rock sound to combine really well with this synth rock sound?
Hmm.
Kind of nice side effect of having so many songs is just like, even if these songs don't match well together, maybe I can release one album that's super distorted and just kind of guitar led, and I'll release another album that's more synth led. I'm
Hmm.
not saying I have two albums in store or anything. None of this is binding, but
Yeah.
yeah, like it's nice to kind of categorize your songs based on how they sound.
Yeah. Just do like a double album, like where one of each, and it's like light and dark. No,
Yeah, maybe
that's
one day.
like a very prog rock thing to do. I don't actually recommend that unless you want to go prog. Then hell yeah
Yeah,
to that, I
maybe.
guess.
Yeah, maybe we'll go prog next go around. We'll just have like 12-minute long songs about
Oh,
like the human condition.
and like aliens or like time travel or something. Whatever
Yeah, we'll just
those
get
British
our
people
Mars
are on
Volta
about.
on or something. Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited for people to hear the new version of Winter in Limbo and all these other songs eventually. Um, once
Thank
it's
you.
safe to work on those and flesh them out a little bit. But I like just seeing where or what people have been listening to as a way of kind of wrapping up the interview. So what other local bands and local artists just doesn't matter whether they're released recently or not, but like who have you been listening to a lot of, just kind of had on repeat
Well, I've
lately?
been repeating "Ode to Space Lady" by Harper's Jar. That shit is great. Have you listened to that one?
Yeah, yeah, I
They just
have.
released it yet. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course
like a
you
couple
have.
weeks ago.
It's your copy. Who am I talking to? You're your copy. But yeah, I love that. My friend Lucas Kermis, he's a great musician. He just released a song called "Escaping Someone Else," which is this really freaky kind of like acoustic ballad that has a lot of just kind of unexpected turns to it. I've been listening to that a lot. He also, even more recently, released a song called "I Thought I Died." Very freaky
Oh,
stuff. Really cool though. Really just
yeah.
like just odd and just oddball stuff, and
Hmm.
it's great. And
Yeah,
listening to his stuff inspires me to like go to like weird, go down those weird avenues that you might not think about,
yeah.
and not be afraid to like take your music to a strange place. Um, Lucas Rallo, I don't know if he's gonna be cool with me saying this, but he's also been working on some music, and I want him
Ooh.
to fucking release it already. Like he's got so many great tunes under his belt that I've had the pleasure of listening to,
You
and
gotta
hopefully he
bully them
can.
harder. Just get them out there.
I know I'm trying. I mean, you got to be supportive,
Yeah.
and I am. Um, I've also been listening to Wither Rivers, which
Okay.
is another friend of mine. He's this really great guitarist. He's in Ithamid and the Atlantis Theorem.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of
They've
them.
been playing around. Yeah, so this is his solo. His name's Kevin. It's his solo project, and it's still very like math rocky, with kind of like guttural, kind of like vocals going over the top. I don't really know what the genre is,
Like
but it's really just kind of like
deathcore, like
complex. Yeah, it's some kind of core, math core. There's a core involved there.
yeah.
But yeah, really just jumbled kind of math rock songs. Just released an EP. I wish I could remember the name of it. Damn
Well,
it.
people will hear the
Uh,
name and they'll hopefully be able to just like look it up on Bandcamp or
yeah,
something.
yeah. Check out Wither Rivers. He's everywhere, and he just released this EP. It's sick. I love it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of people.
There's so
those
many.
are just kind of off the top of my head.
Yeah, if we listed every single band or everyone listed every single band, this would be like a 3-hour interview, and 2 hours of it would just be listing bands. Which is a good problem to have as far as a city goes when there's that many talented musicians putting stuff out.
Yeah, totally. And I'm so happy that I'm part of this scene.
Yeah, it rocks. Well, again, congrats on the release. Speaking in the future, of course. It's really awesome to talk to you, kind of figure out where your head's been at about this, and yeah, just rock on for the new release. It'll be available February 12th?
February 5th.
5th. Okay, February 5th. Hit streaming services and everything, correct?
That's right. It's going to be everywhere February 5th, and then we got a live stream concert on February 6th.
Ooh, stay tuned for both of those. Yeah. Do you have any other things you want to plug really quick before we wrap this up?
Those are my two main plugs. Just, check out Winter in Limbo, comes out everywhere February 5th. And then we've got a live stream show on February 6th with Melodic Noise Media. It's going to be tight. Check out all those amazing bands I mentioned.
Yeah, definitely do that.
Lucas Kermis, Wither Rivers. Check that shit out. It's amazing. I don't need to tell you Harper's Jar, but if you don't know Harper's Jar, you better start listening to them.
Yeah.
They rock. But thanks a lot for having me, man.
The Ear Coffee Podcast is a companion to the blog of the same name. If you like this episode, please leave us a rate and review so we can stand out among the other music podcasts. You can follow us at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @EarCoffee. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.